Hey folks, Andy here, thanks for joining me. Right, this is the second video in the guitar setup series, and this time out we're going to have a look at the electrics on Sam's Les Paul. I'm also going to have a quick glance at my Strat, just to kind of bring in the flavour of a different style of guitar. But fundamentally, electrics are pretty similar in a lot of cases. You've got pickups, you've got some wiring, you've got a few components like capacitors and resistors, you've got pots, you've got switches, you've got an output socket or more than one output socket, and you may in some cases have active electronics, you may have active pickups, you may have different flavors of switching, but the fundamentals are pretty much what the fundamentals are. And of course the simplest way to check that everything is working on a guitar is to play it and trial the controls and see if they do what you expect them to. We're going to make sure that both of the pickups are working, that the selector switch does what we think it should, that all of the control knobs work properly, that the output jack is secure and noise free. So selecting the bridge pickup, okay, and that's the bridge volume control. We're looking to see if it's smooth, no crackles, anything unpleasant like that, and if it turns the volume down and up in, what seems like a reasonable manner. And the tone control, the bridge pickup, same thing again, is it crackle free and does it actually do something? And going to the neck pickup. So neck volume control, does it turn down? Does it turn up? And same thing again with the tone control. So we've got the middle position now, and this is a funny one on a Les Paul because of the way the controls interact. So we just go through and make sure that things actually seem to be working. Can we blend in the pickups as we expect? And do we get that strange Gibson thing where if you turn either of the pickups off, you don't get any sound at all? And they're just giving the output jack a little wiggle via the lead to make sure that that is nice and secure, because they do sometimes work loose, get oxidized, dirty or something like that. Okay, and that all seems to be working. Okay, so just to sort of bring the changes, this is my Strat, different to the Les Paul in that all the electrics are mounted on the scratch plate, got 3 pickups, 5-way selector, 3 controls. These say volume, tone and tone, but they're not, because what this has is a master tone which affects all 3 pickups, and then a blend which brings in the neck pickup. So we've got the bridge, middle, neck, neck and middle, bridge and middle. Then the volume control, and you can hear it sort of intermittently scratching in there. That's got to be replaced. Now here's the funny thing, I can never quite remember which way round the tone and the blend control are because I don't really use them, I leave them wide open, so this is where the tap test comes in handy. There you go, you can hear that tapping, turn it off and do the other control and it's not doing anything, and that's telling me which one of these is the blend control. Now the other thing I'll mention is that I have had issues with the jack socket being a bit scratchy, so that's something else that's going to have to get a real wide job. You can see it's a little bit loose there. Right, so the good news is, Sam's Les Paul, everything seems to be working absolutely fine. But I think we should maybe just pop the covers off the back and have a look at what's inside there anyway. It'll give me a chance to show you the couple of maintenance tasks that we quite often have to do on a guitar. And also, if you've never seen what one looks like on the inside, well, it's a chance to do that. The Strat, the volume pot is definitely on the way out. and the output socket is a little bit crackly and intermittent. It's been like that for a while. I've got a set of parts and I'm going to do an upgrade on that, which will be the subject of another video. But for the moment, let's just have a quick look at what these maintenance jobs look like. So there's a Les Paul lying on the workbench. I've got it on a towel, which I've brushed off just to make sure there are no bits on it that could scratch the surface. Now, because I'm going to be working on the guitar with it flipped over, because while all the controls are on the front, all of the access is through the back, I'm going to protect the frets to make sure that there's no danger of the strings dinging or denting them by pressing into them. Okay, so this is what the back of the Les Paul looks like. This cover sits behind the switch, and this one sits behind the pots. Let's get the right size screwdriver out. I'm going to try it by hand just to make sure it's the right fit. Yep, that one's absolutely fine. So let's take this one off. Three screws out. Put those somewhere safe. Just tuck them in the lid of the screwdriver box. Then just pop the cover off. You see it's shiny on the outside and matte on the inside, so we know which way round that goes when we put it back on. And there we can see the back of the switch. Now that does feel a little tiny bit loose, got a bit of play in there. I'm undoing the nut, and what we need to be careful of here is that we don't keep twisting it round so it strains and ultimately breaks those wires. And there's the switch sliding out. And you can see there how a Gibson switch works. We've got two sprung contacts, and as you move the switch, the plastic actuator basically levers one of the springs out of the way and breaks the connection. And when the switch is in the middle position, both sets of connections are made. Now, I did one time have an issue on my SG when I picked it up, and the neck pickup was just completely dead, no sound at all. I think what had happened was I'd left it with the switch in the bridge position, so that contact was closed, and the neck pickup position was open, so I think it just picked up a bit of tarnish or corrosion in there. Because these contact points just touch each other, there's no sliding, there's no cleaning action. And all it took to sort it out was a little bit of wet and dry paper. Now this is a 250 grit, I've just got it to show it to you. I'd actually use a 4 or 600, which is much finer. And then just put it in between those contacts and draw it gently through once or twice. Very gentle, you're not trying to take any metal off. Just remove any tarnish or any corrosion that's gotten in there. And that was literally all it took to get my SG working again. Just go in much more gently than you'd ever think you needed to, and that'll do the job. So this is what a Fender switch looks like, and you can see it's quite different to the Gibson one. Whereas the contacts on the Gibson one just touch each other, on this they actually slide against each other. So any tarnish or corrosion that builds up on the contacts basically gets scraped off every time you use it. So if you do find that your Strat or Tele style guitar goes a bit intermittent, just whack the switch forwards and backwards a few times, see if that clears it up, maybe give it a spray with some cleaner. On the Gibson style one, the contacts literally just touch each other with no cleaning action at all. So from that point of view, the Fender switch holds the edge. Now, for cleaning contacts, we use a contact cleaner. Do make sure you get something that's safe for use around plastics, and also be aware that some chemicals can damage some guitar finishes. Nitrocellulose is quite delicate, polyesters, acrylics, things like that are usually pretty much bulletproof, but check before you use it. Okay, so let's pop off that other cover, see what's behind there. And that's what the control cavity looks like. There you've got your 4 pots and the output cable going through the body to the output jack. There's the capacitors for the tone controls, and this is Gibson modern style wiring. Now you can see that this guitar has a little bit of tag board in there. You do get alternatives, you get some which have got straight point to point wiring, you'll get some which have got a small PCB, a circuit board in there, and if you have different switching or active electronics, you just have to work through it, work out what it does, but general maintenance tasks are pretty much the same. If you have scratchy pots, you can try cleaning them out with contact cleaner. You can put a squirt in the slot at the base, or I've seen cases of people actually squirting it down the shaft. It's never really worked very well for me, but hey, you can give it a try. Now, there's lots of debate about what sort of contact cleaner you use on pots. Most people, myself included, will opt for something that's got a lubricant in it, but whatever you go for, just make sure that it is safe to use on carbon tracks. Otherwise, you could just spray it in there and end up doing more harm than good. Now, there's a line of thinking that says don't bother with any of this, just buy replacements. And, you know, there could be something to be said for that. You pays your money, so you take your chances. Now, something that does happen is that the nuts on the jack sockets work loose, and it can be tempting to just put a spanner or a nut runner on there and tighten it up in place. If you do that, you run the risk of twisting the socket and pulling the wiring out of it. It's just not worth doing. It only takes a moment. Do the job properly. Take the jack socket plate off. You've got to be careful with these. This one, like old Les Pauls, has got a plastic plate on it, and they are prone to cracking and breaking. In fact, I believe that Larry DiMarzio of DiMarzio Pickups actually made his start selling replacement plates for old Les Pauls. And if you look carefully here, you can see that this one is actually cracked. It just happens they go brittle with age. The irony is that my Les Paul, which is a much more ordinary model than this one, actually comes with a metal plate, so just doesn't have that problem. I'm just going to use a nut runner to tighten this up. I'll hold the socket on the inside and just sort of finger tighten it. Don't want to go too mad with it, because we're basically fastening a flat nut onto a curved plate, so you've got to be careful. We don't want to crack it. And it's not a bad idea to stop these things from having to be done over and again. Just reassemble it with a dab of Loctite or nail varnish, something like that on. Stop the nuts unfastening. Bearing in mind that this has a flat edge and a curved edge on it, when you put it back on the guitar, make sure it's the right way around. Always, just stop, have a look and sanity check before you commit. And while you're in there, if you want to, you can give the contacts a little tighten up, just make sure they're good. Just use finger pressure, it doesn't have to be super tight. Now, these are the screws that hold bits in place on this guitar, and you can see that they are tiny. So just ease them into place with fingers, make sure that they're straight and true. Remember that these screws are going into wood that's had little spiral grooves cut out by the self-tapping screw cutting into it. And we really don't want to risk just ripping out those little very fine threads of wood. The screw looks wonky, just check it, realign it. You can see here that I'm just using the bit of the screwdriver between my fingers. I'm happy to use the handle when I'm taking screws out, but when putting it in, doing it this way, it means that it's quite difficult to get extra torque on the driver, which means that I'm less likely to end up inadvertently damaging the threads. An alternative is to use a precision screwdriver. They come with narrow handles, so they're a lot finer to use and less likely to do damage. Now, sometimes you'll find that you may have dirty contacts, and that's all. In that case, you don't really always need to take the socket out. You just spray some contact cleaner onto a bit of paper towel, put it onto a plug, and just plug it in and out a couple of times. Support the jack socket plate so that you don't end up cracking it or making those cracks worse. I suggest you don't use a gold-plated plug because the plate will wear off. Just use a bog standard metal one. Now, the last thing we're going to check is the guitar's earthing. When you get a problem, it often manifests as, that thing when the guitar buzzes and you touch the strings and it goes away? Well, that's happening because when you touch the strings or the bridge, you're being earthed through the same earth point as the amp. So if the guitar earth isn't there, the noise doesn't go away. It's dead simple to check. All we're going to do is connect one side of a multimeter to the strings, and then we're going to probe to the outside of the jack socket, and if we've got continuity, then we're good. And there you go, that looks absolutely fine. If it wasn't, then we would have to have a delve in and see what's gone wrong with the connection of the wire that goes either from the tailpiece or the bridge through to the jack socket. But in this case, we're fine here. Now, it's easier to see on a guitar like a Strat, where you can clearly see that earth wire soldered onto the claw for the trem springs. So there we have it. Most of the time, diagnosing guitar electrics is as simple as play it, and if it seems to work, then it's good and don't worry too much about it. If you do need to do a bit of maintenance work on it, then it's mostly going to be as simple as doing a little bit of cleaning, as we have looked at in this video. And beyond that, you may need to occasionally swap out components. If you do a lot of violining on the volume control, you may wear through the pot and have to replace it. And that starts to bring you into a few little sort of basic skills, like using tools without marring the finish of your guitar, a bit of basic soldering, that sort of thing. And we can have a look at that in another video. But yep, most of the time, if it feels good, if it works, if it seems to do what it's supposed to, then really just don't worry about it and move on to the next step. Okay, hope this is useful. If it is, maybe give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when new content comes out. And until next time, look after yourselves. I'm Andy Picker, and I'll see you then. Bye now.